If you've watched my first video, you know that on New Year's Eve in 1994 was a real critical turning point in my life. I threw up for the first time and just really struggling with a lot of depression, isolation, and loneliness. And as I mentioned in my first video, that initial step of throwing up became a door that I knew I was opening and that I wouldn't be able to close. It started out in January, kind of like a New Year's resolution. I was going to be the most fit, the best version of myself. I really thought it was kind of encouraging myself and a way to kind of reset my life. We do that, don't we? And I started working out every day, counting calories. But of course, this quickly, and I mean quickly, evolved into an absolute obsession with trying to get down to 30 calories a day, trying to get down to 0 calories a day, trying to work off all the calories and then go into the negative so that I actually had negative calories. And then I just made up my mind in 6 weeks, I'm going to have the most muscular, everything is going to be so muscular and tone and perfect. And I was chasing this perfection. I knew it was unhealthy, but it gave me something that I could control and that I could focus on. It was just an incessant, driven push. Who I was eventually felt like I was this little flame on the inside. So, you know, deep within, the real me was slowly getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And by the end of this 8 months, it felt like I was just a teeny tiny little flame. And like if somebody just came and put the cap on that, I would have been extinguished. That's one of the reasons I'm calling this painting Diminishing, because it's like my actual being was being squeezed and snuffed out by all of this chaos that I had let in. Now, I didn't mean to let it in. I thought I was just doing a simple act of throwing up and getting obsessed with exercise. Maybe I would have admitted that I had kind of like a food addiction or an unhealthy relationship with food, but it was way much more than that. I had definitely opened a spiritual door, and what started to happen was this voice that suggested something became my taskmaster. So I heard it all the time, telling me how fat I was, how gross I was, how I needed to do more. I needed to do more. I needed to exercise more. I needed to cut more. I needed to learn more. And then there'd be this tug of war between, but I want to eat, but no, you must starve, but I can't starve. So when it becomes too difficult for me, then I will just eat everything. And those of you who have struggled with this know what I'm talking about. But it's just like you hold out as long as humanly possible, and then you just can't anymore. So you give in and you eat whatever you possibly can because your body is in need of nourishment. And then the guilt comes in, and then the shame comes in. And it is so painful because you failed. You failed at starving. But that's how it was for me anyway. And once that would happen, it was the end of the world. I'm not kidding that it just felt like there was no point in living if I couldn't accomplish this. Day to day was just constant obsession. There was no break in my mind to even think about anything else. You know, I have a cookbook here, and all I would do is read cookbooks. I would lay on the floor in my sister's house, and I would open up the cookbook, and I would just sit there and stare at the pictures, and because I was so hungry, and I would read every single little ingredient, and I would just dream and fantasize what it would be like to be able to cook this and eat this. But no, I wouldn't let myself do it. You know, it was like tease myself and then just say absolutely not. I worked in a retail store in the mall. When there was no customers in the store, I would go to the back room and work out when nobody was looking. I started to it just got so much worse. And my family was so loving during this time. I'm sure from their perspective, and I wish I could have just had them sit right next to me, but it's not possible right now. But I'm sure they would tell you that they didn't understand and they wanted to help so much. And, for my poor mom, all she could think of was how could she get me to eat, because she knew that I wasn't doing well, and how could she get me to be healthy again? And to me, that was the ultimate sin, was to try to make me eat. It was like, well, I'm trying to accomplish this goal, how dare you try to make me eat? You're going against my goal, and that would just be awful. So I was absolutely just so hurtful to them. I went to move in with my sister, thinking a different change of environment would help. And in some ways, it felt like a little bit of a new start, but you can't run away from what's really happening, because it's happening inside of you. And so obviously you carry it with you, right? And so it didn't really change that much. And as the voices progressively over the months got louder and louder and louder, I was obeying them, and I was drinking maybe 2 to 3 pots of coffee a day just to keep myself feeling somewhat full of something, smoking just to keep my mouth busy, taking thyroid medication because I have low thyroid, and I started overdosing on that because my rationale, I was like, well, if this helps me have a higher metabolism or something, if I take 3 of them, then I'll have even higher metabolism. And pushing myself to the ultimate limits of being able to run, bike, exercise, lift weights constantly. It was not about exercise anymore. It was not about fitness anymore. It was about destroying myself. This guilt and shame cycle it was like birth pangs, they compounded upon each other. So it was once in a while that I was feeling shameful, but then, they're starting to stack. Now it's like every minute I'm feeling shameful about something, and it's almost like this thing brought its friends, because there was like, it started one little voice suggestion, and now it's like an army of voices and suggestions and demands, and these are all spiritual truths. I didn't know it then, but in the spirit realm, I had let all these things in, and they're real. And so my theory from high school, if somebody looks crazy, is it possible that they're not exactly crazy, they're experiencing something that the rest of us do not see, was actually playing out in my own life. I was absolutely experiencing something that everybody else didn't see, but that's absolutely real. I was brought to, a therapist. My sister actually brought me to her, and we filled out the depression form, on scales of like 1 to 10, you're feeling this way, that way. And when she got to the end, she pretty much said, you're high risk, and we're gonna keep you on this list. If you feel like you want to take your life or something, call the hospital, something like that. So I was at the lowest of the low, according to them at that point. I remember sitting in her office, and I'm looking at her, and I don't know anything about the spirit realm, but these things, like these little inklings, these moments would happen where I would say something, or somebody would say something, where it was so powerful and revelatory at that moment. I didn't realize, I can look back now and see how God was reaching out to me, because it was just, there was no explanation for these things, right? I'm sitting in her office, and I looked at her and said, all the things that you're telling me sound really good, but I can remember being 12. I can remember being 8. I can remember playing in my yard. I can remember playing with Barbies. I could remember having fun and not feeling this. So my question was like, why is this here now? And why can't I just go back to being the person that I was before this was here? Well, she had no answer for that. And to me, that was like, it was like ludicrous. Like, what do you mean? I wasn't this way forever. So why can't I just be what I was? And there was no good answer. And that wasn't good enough for me, even though I was in this really fragile state. there was like a stubbornness in me to say that that's not good enough. There's got to be a better answer than that. But she did what she could, and I'm grateful for her help. And I eventually went to a support group at one of the best residential facilities for eating disorders in our state. So I went there and I was sitting amongst women who all were struggling with this. So I had some hope that maybe I would get, some answers there. It was called the Institute of Living, and there was a room full of women older than me, so I was kind of a little bit hopeful, thinking that, I would hear something really helpful from these women who obviously were older and more experienced. And one by one, they started telling their stories, how their week went. The one thing that I still remember to this day was just one story that stuck out to me. It was like, oh, surely, maybe she's got something really helpful. She said, today I was craving, I think she said like butter pecan ice cream or something. And she was driving around and I was like, yeah, I do that. And she was just like obsessing about it. Like she couldn't get it out of her head. Yeah, I do that. And so what did she do? She was so afraid she was gonna binge eat and throw up. So she pulls over into a CVS and gets a bag of Werther's candy, because Werther's candy tastes like butter pecan ice cream. And she went to her car and she sucked on a bunch of Werther's, and the feeling subsided and she was okay. So she survived. And I thought to myself, wait, these ladies are doing better than me? Because that doesn't seem better. It seems like exactly the same thing, except they're not physically throwing up and hurting themselves, but the inner turmoil is exactly the same. So I was like, that's not an answer either. And so I never went back, but that really lasted with me. And I felt really hopeless in the fact that it just seemed like there was no way to escape this strange Pandora's box that I had opened, right? There was just no way to escape it. I'm seeing that everybody's locked up the way I am. And I'm thinking it's getting more dismal, I can't really see a future anymore. And what really was like, it hit me is like, I had been really smart in high school. I was at the top of my class, and I valued my education, and I was smarter than this, I was better than this. How in the world did I end up here? There was times where I had just shut down talking for the most part because there was so much turmoil going on. So I would just, if you came to talk to me, I would kind of just mutter out a few words or cuss at you or something like that. Especially my family who was trying to get close, I would just push them away. And I just remember them talking to me one time, and I just felt like I was in this weird capsule and I knew they couldn't get in. And I just stared at them, and it felt like I was in like I I was entombed in something, and they're talking to me, and I'm seeing their face, and they're physically close, but I couldn't come out of this thing that I was in. And I couldn't talk. I was literally like closed and full of anger that they wanted to be close. It was such a tug of war. A couple months later, and my old boyfriend started visiting me. He heard that I was in town, and he started to come to see me, and he had become a Christian and started bringing me these little things, these little booklets about the Bible and what it said and eternity. And I was like so offended that he thought he was better than me. And all he would say was, God has a better life for you than this. And I was so mad. Like, I was doing fine, of course. Look at me. I'm I'm getting physically fit, and sure. This went on for several months, and I was really mean to him. And I just got darker and darker and started obsessing with like death and death music, and he invited me for a bike ride one day, and I said yes because I thought, hey, that's exercise, I could say yes to that. I agreed to go on a bike ride, but this one fateful day my mom made food for me, and that never went well. I ran to the kitchen and I stuck my hand in the pot and I just shoved it in my mouth really quick because it was shameful to watch me eat. I would never eat in front of anybody. That was a no-no. And then the shame just came like, ha, you failed. You ate? How dare you make me food to eat? And so now I'm enraged at my mother, I'm enraged at myself, and I run upstairs, and this was the first time that I actually asked God to kill me. I prayed that he would just end my life. That would be easier than this mental anguish that I was in. And guess who shows up for a bike ride right at this time? Willie, my old boyfriend. And I'm infuriated. I will not go downstairs for anything. And so he's waiting patiently. I don't know what he was thinking. I just know my poor mom was like, I don't know what to do with her. I just sat there and I just thought, this is it. And I'm telling you, this particular day, my little candle was like the size of this match. It was so small. Me was like this big in the middle of me. I was almost gone. That's what it felt like. Because the voices had just come in so much, and they were so loud, and there were so many of them. And as I'm watching him come out of the window, I'm watching him out of the window, he's riding his bike. And every time he looked like he was going further away from my house, this fear would just come over me, and I'd say, oh my God, please don't leave. And then he'd turn around and ride back on my driveway, and I'd go, oh, thank God. And then I'd get mad, and I'd say, I wish he'd get out of here. So this went on for a while, this little tug of war cycle. And I just felt like I was absolutely out of my mind. And finally I was like, I gotta get out of here. So I ran downstairs, I got on my bike, and I just went as fast as humanly possible. And I started riding. We had this one straight road. It was really long. And so I just went down this road. I was biking super fast to make sure he couldn't catch up with me. Nobody could catch up with me. And I got to this park, this big open air, big field of grass. And I pull in there and I'm totally out of breath. And I just throw myself on a swing, and I'm swinging as high as I can. And let me tell you, what happens at this park changes my entire life. See you at the next video.